The red thong wasn't mine, and it definitely wasn't Maren's size. I found it wedged under the passenger seat of Mrs. Henderson's Rolls Royce at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, my hands covered in leather conditioner and my back aching from 3 hours of detail work. The garage smelled like chemical cleaners and that particular blend of motor oil and disappointment that seemed to follow me everywhere these days. "Well, that's interesting," I muttered, holding up the scrap of lace with a pair of tweezers. My first thought was almost funny. Maybe it was a new kind of air freshener. My second thought was considerably less amusing. I'm Owen Carter, 36 years old, owner of Carter Clean Mobile Detailing. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy enough that I don't have to think too hard about how my marriage has been circling the drain for the past 6 months. My wife Maren handles the books and scheduling, which means she knows exactly where every vehicle goes and when it comes back. The Henderson job was supposed to be routine. Rich lady, expensive car, easy money. But as I bagged the evidence and locked it in my toolbox, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stumbled onto something that was going to change everything. Maren was already asleep when I got home, or at least pretending to be. She'd been doing that a lot lately, turning away when I climbed into bed, mumbling about being tired from handling the administrative side of the business. The administrative side that apparently required her to work late 3 nights a week and take mysterious phone calls that she always stepped outside to answer. I sat in my truck in the driveway for 20 minutes, staring at our modest 2-story house with its peeling paint and overgrown hedges. The porch light was off, which meant Maren hadn't bothered to leave it on for me. Again. Inside, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and opened my laptop. Carter Clean's booking system showed 37 active clients, 14 completed jobs this week, and a profit margin that should have made us both happy. Should have. I pulled up the vehicle logs for our work van, the one Maren used for supply runs and client meetings. The mileage told an interesting story. According to her reports, she'd driven 12 miles on Monday for a supply pickup. According to the odometer, she'd driven 47. My phone buzzed. Text message from Tyler Brooks, my assistant, and the guy I'd stupidly started to think of as a friend. "Hey boss, left some paperwork in the van. Mind if I grab it tomorrow morning?" Tyler. 28 years old, cocky smile, and the kind of easy charm that made clients request him specifically. He'd been with Carter Clean for 8 months, ever since I'd hired him away from a competitor who wasn't paying him enough. I'd given him keys, routes, and access to pretty much everything except the bank accounts. I stared at the text for a long time before responding. Sure, van's in the usual spot. But instead of going to bed, I found myself digging through the junk drawer in the kitchen until I located the dash camera I'd bought 6 months ago and never installed. It was a small thing, barely bigger than a matchbox, designed to record continuously and save footage to a memory card. The bourbon made the decision easier. I slipped back outside, popped the hood of the work van, and spent 20 minutes installing the camera behind the rearview mirror where it would be virtually invisible. The whole time, I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that there was probably a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything. But I'd been married to Maren for 7 years, and I knew the difference between tired and guilty. I knew the difference between busy and secretive. And I definitely knew the difference between working late and lying through her teeth. The next morning, Maren was already gone when I woke up. She'd left a note on the coffee maker. "Meeting with the Peterson account this afternoon. Might be late. Don't wait up." I called the Peterson account. They'd never heard of any meeting. 3 days of footage, 3 days of watching my wife drive to the same location, a rundown apartment complex on the east side of town where Tyler Brooks lived in Unit 4B. 3 days of watching them disappear inside for 2 to 3 hours at a time before emerging with the kind of satisfied, disheveled look that made my stomach turn. But it was the footage from Thursday afternoon that really did me in. They'd used the van. I watched on my laptop screen as Maren climbed into the back seat, followed by Tyler. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. Clear enough to see her hands in his hair, clear enough to see him pulling off her blouse, clear enough to watch my 7-year marriage dissolve into a 23-minute display of betrayal that would have made a porn director blush. Jesus Christ, I whispered, pausing the video as Tyler's bare ass filled the frame. At least they didn't stain the leather. The joke fell flat, even to me. I was sitting in my garage at 2 a.m, drinking bourbon straight from the bottle and watching my wife screw my employee in the back of my work van. There wasn't enough sarcasm in the world to make that funny. I saved the footage to 3 different locations, including a cloud storage account that Maren didn't know about. Then I opened a notebook and started making a list. Step 1, secure the evidence. Done. Step 2, change all company passwords and access codes. Step 3, consult with Jerry Hoffman, my accountant, about separating business assets from personal accounts. Step 4, contact Linda Walsh, the lawyer who'd handled our business incorporation, about termination procedures and divorce filings. Step 5, notify our insurance company about the policy violation. Using company vehicles for personal activities, especially the kind of personal activities I'd just witnessed, was explicitly prohibited under our commercial coverage. I worked through the night, methodically documenting everything. Mileage discrepancies, unexplained expenses, timesheets that didn't match actual hours worked. By sunrise, I had enough evidence to bury both of them professionally and personally. Maren came home at 7:15, claiming she'd stayed overnight at her mother's house because it was too late to drive safely. She was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, and her hair looked like she'd finger-combed it in a car mirror. "Morning, honey," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Sorry about last night. Mom needed help with some legal documents." "No problem," I replied, sipping my coffee and watching her over the rim of the mug. I kept myself busy. She showered for 45 minutes. When she came downstairs, I was gone. Jerry Hoffman's office smelled like old coffee and newer money. He'd been handling Carter Clean's books since I started the business, and he knew every detail of our financial structure. "You want to do what?" he asked, leaning back in his leather chair. "Separate the business accounts from the personal accounts, completely. And I want Maren removed as a signatory on everything except the household checking account." Jerry frowned. "Owen, that's a pretty drastic step. Is everything okay at home?" I slid a printed screenshot across his desk. It showed Maren and Tyler entering his apartment building, timestamp clearly visible. "Everything's fine. I just want to protect the business assets." It took Jerry about 3 seconds to understand. Oh, hell. Owen, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just make it happen." Linda Walsh was more direct. "Do you want a divorce, or do you want to destroy her?" "I want both," I said, "but I want to do it legally." Linda had handled my business incorporation, my commercial insurance claims, and 3 employment disputes over the years. She knew I wasn't the type to make emotional decisions, which made my request all the more interesting to her. "Adultery isn't grounds for a fault-based divorce in this state anymore," she explained. "But if she's been using business resources for personal activities, especially activities that violate your insurance coverage, that's a different story." "How different?" "Different enough that she could be liable for reimbursement of any costs associated with the misuse of company property. Different enough that terminating her employment would be justified. Different enough that her claim to business assets in a divorce would be significantly weakened." I left Linda's office with a folder full of documents and a timeline that would make the next 2 weeks very interesting for everyone involved. The insurance call was almost anticlimactic. I explained the policy violation to a claims representative named Sandra, uploaded the relevant footage to their secure server, and received a case number for their investigation. Sandra assured me that any claims arising from the misuse of the vehicle would be denied, and that the policyholders would be liable for any damages or legal costs. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, I'd changed every password, moved every business asset into accounts that only I could access, and set up automatic documentation for every transaction. Maren's access to the business was now limited to her company email account, which I could monitor, and her company credit card, which had a $500 limit. She called me at 6:30, screaming, "What the hell did you do?" she demanded. "I can't access the booking system, I can't see the bank accounts, and the credit card was declined at the grocery store." "System maintenance," I said calmly. "Jerry's updating the financial software. Should be resolved in a few days." "This is ridiculous, Owen. I handle the administrative side of this business. I need access to—" "You need access to what, exactly?" I interrupted. "The client files you haven't updated in 3 weeks? The payroll system you've been ignoring? Or maybe you need access to the van for another supply run that doesn't involve any actual supplies?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. "I don't know what you're implying," she finally said, but her voice had lost its edge. "I'm not implying anything," I replied. "I'm just taking care of business. Speaking of which, Tyler's been reassigned. I'll be handling his routes personally for the next few weeks." "You can't just reassign him without talking to me first." "Actually, I can. I'm the owner, remember? You're just an employee." I hung up before she could respond. Tyler showed up at my garage the next morning looking like he hadn't slept. His usual cocky swagger was nowhere to be found, replaced by the kind of nervous energy that guilty people wear like cheap cologne. "Hey, boss," he said, not quite making eye contact. "Heard about the route changes. Everything okay?" I was under the hood of a BMW, pretending to check fluid levels while I watched his reflection in the windshield. "Everything's fine, just restructuring some things." "Right. Well, if you need me to work extra hours or anything, I'm available. You know I'm committed to the business." "Committed," I repeated, savoring the word. "That's interesting choice of words." Tyler shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Look, if this is about Maren and me working together on some of the client accounts, I want you to know that everything's been completely professional." I straightened up and turned to face him. "Professional?" "Absolutely. I mean, we've had to coordinate on scheduling and routing, but it's all been business-related." "Business-related?" I echoed. "Like the business you conducted in the back of the work van on Thursday afternoon?" The color drained from Tyler's face so quickly I thought he might pass out. "I don't know what you're talking about." I walked over to my workbench and picked up a manila envelope. From it, I extracted a single printed photograph, a screenshot from the dash camera footage showing Tyler and Maren in a position that would have made a yoga instructor jealous. "This kind of business-related activity?" I asked, holding up the photo. Tyler stared at the image for a long moment, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Owen, I can explain." "No need," I interrupted. "The picture explains everything pretty clearly, along with the other 47 pictures I have from the same session. Look, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been screwing my wife in my work van during company hours, violating about 12 different policies and probably a few laws. The only question now is whether you want to resign or get fired." Tyler's shock was rapidly giving way to anger. "You can't prove anything. That picture could be anyone." I walked back to my workbench and picked up a second envelope, this one considerably thicker. Time-stamped data from the dash camera. GPS logs from the van showing it parked at your apartment for 3 hours. Credit card receipts showing Maren bought condoms and lubricant on the company card. Phone records showing 47 text messages between you two during business hours yesterday, including several that would make a sailor blush. I spread the evidence across the workbench like a poker player revealing a royal flush. Oh, and my personal favorite. The insurance company's preliminary finding that any claims related to the misuse of company vehicles will be denied, leaving both of you personally liable for damages. Tyler stared at the evidence, his face cycling through several different emotions before settling on something that looked like panic. Jesus, Owen. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to happen. It just did. Things don't just happen, Tyler. People make choices. You chose to screw my wife. She chose to let you. I'm choosing to fire your ass. You can't do this. I need this job. You should have thought about that before you needed my wife. Tyler's panic was transforming into something uglier. Fine. Fire me. But you're not the only one with evidence. I've got texts from Maren complaining about you, about how you ignore her, how you're never home, how you care more about this stupid business than your own marriage. Really? I said, genuinely interested. And you think that justifies adultery? I think it explains it. Well, here's something that might interest you, I said, pulling out my phone and opening the voice recording app. This entire conversation has been recorded, including your admission of adultery and your attempt to justify it by blaming me for your criminal behavior. Tyler's eyes widened. You recorded me without my consent? This is a one-party consent state, genius. I can record any conversation I'm part of, and since this is my property and you're my employee, I can record anything that happens here. I stopped the recording and saved it with a timestamp. Now, would you like to resign, or shall I fire you for cause? Because I should mention that being fired for cause means no unemployment benefits, no reference letter, and a permanent notation in your employment file that will make it very difficult to find another job in this industry. Tyler stood there for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists. For a second, I thought he might try to hit me, which would have been a mistake on several levels. I'm not a big man, but I've been doing physical labor for 15 years, and Tyler looked like he got his exercise from a gym membership he rarely used. This isn't over, he finally said. Actually, it is. Clean out your locker and leave your keys and uniform on my desk. You have 10 minutes before I call the police and report you for trespassing. Tyler stormed out without another word, leaving his keys on the workbench and slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I watched through the security camera as he climbed into his beat-up Honda and peeled out of the parking lot, probably heading straight to Maren to warn her about what had just happened. I was counting on it. My phone started ringing at 11:47 a.m. The first call was from Maren, which I let go to voicemail. The second was from Maren's mother, Lorna Voss, which I also ignored. The third was from a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, it was Tyler. You think you're so smart, he said without preamble, but you don't know everything. I know enough. Maren's going to take you for everything you're worth. She's got lawyers, Owen. Good ones. I'm sure she does. Tell me who's paying for these lawyers. Because as of yesterday, she doesn't have access to any business accounts, and her personal credit cards are maxed out. The silence on the other end told me I'd hit a nerve. Oh, wait, I continued. Let me guess. Mommy's paying for the lawyers. Lorna Voss with her country club membership, and her Mercedes, and her complete disdain for the blue-collar guy her daughter married. I bet she's thrilled to finally have an excuse to get rid of me. You're a bastard, Tyler said. Maybe, but I'm a bastard who owns a successful business, has detailed documentation of every crime you and my wife have committed, and knows exactly how to make both of your lives very difficult without breaking a single law. I hung up and immediately called Linda Walsh. Owen, she said, I was just about to call you. I've received a very interesting phone call from an attorney named Richard Steinberg. Apparently, he represents your wife, and he'd like to discuss a settlement. What kind of settlement? The kind where you give her half of everything and promise not to pursue any criminal charges related to the adultery. I laughed. And what did you tell Mr. Steinberg? I told him that adultery isn't a crime in this state, but theft of services, misuse of company property, insurance fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty are all actionable offenses. I also mentioned that we have extensive documentation of all of these activities. How did he respond? He asked if we'd be willing to consider mediation. Set it up, I said. This should be interesting. The mediation was scheduled for the following Wednesday at Linda Walsh's office. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would have made a prosecutor weep with joy. Maren showed up 10 minutes late with Richard Steinberg, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who looked like he charged by the syllable. She'd done her hair and makeup carefully, probably hoping to project an image of wounded innocence, but the effect was somewhat undermined by the fact that she couldn't make eye contact with anyone in the room. "Gentlemen, ladies," Steinberg began, settling into his chair like a king taking his throne. "I think we can resolve this matter quickly and amicably. My client is willing to accept a 50-50 split of all marital assets in exchange for a mutual non-disclosure agreement." Linda didn't even blink. "Your client is in no position to make demands, Mr. Steinberg. She's violated her employment contract, misused company property, committed insurance fraud, and breached her fiduciary duty as a corporate officer. We're prepared to pursue both civil and criminal remedies." "Now, let's not be hasty," Steinberg replied, his smile never wavering. "Marital disputes can get messy, and I'm sure Mr. Carter would prefer to keep this matter private." "Actually," I said, speaking for the first time since the introductions, "I'm not particularly concerned about privacy. In fact, I'm thinking about starting a blog. The Cheating Wife Chronicles has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Maren finally looked at me, her eyes wide with something that might have been fear. "You wouldn't. Try me." Linda opened her briefcase and began laying out documents like a dealer spreading cards. "Let's start with the evidence, shall we? We have 47 photographs documenting adultery in a company vehicle. We have GPS logs, credit card receipts, phone records, and text messages. We have documentation of unauthorized use of company resources, falsified expense reports, and violation of insurance policies." She paused to let that sink in before continuing. "We also have Mr. Brooks's recorded admission of adultery and his attempt to blame Mr. Carter for his own criminal behavior." Steinberg's smile was starting to look a little strained. "Criminal behavior is a strong term." "Theft of services is a misdemeanor in this state," Linda interrupted. "Using company property for personal activities without authorization is theft of services. Using company credit cards for personal purchases is credit card fraud. Submitting false expense reports is embezzlement. Those are all minor infractions. Minor infractions that add up to felony charges when you consider the total amount involved. We're looking at approximately $12,000 in misused company resources over the past 8 months. I watched Maren's face go pale as Linda laid out the financial details. $12,000 was enough to turn misdemeanor charges into felony charges, and felony charges meant serious jail time. Furthermore, Linda continued, Mrs. Carter's actions have resulted in the cancellation of the company's insurance coverage for any claims related to the misuse of vehicles. This leaves both Mrs. Carter and Mr. Brooks personally liable for any damages or injuries that might have occurred during their activities. "What damages?" Steinberg asked. Linda smiled. "I'm glad you asked. It seems that during one of their encounters, Mrs. Carter and Mr. Brooks damaged the van's interior. Specifically, they broke the rear bench seat and stained the upholstery. The repair costs come to approximately $3,000, which our insurance company has declined to cover due to the policy violation." I had to admit, Linda was good at this. The seat had actually been broken for months, and the stains were from a coffee spill, but the timing was convenient, and the insurance company's denial letter was genuine. "This is ridiculous," Maren said, finally finding her voice. "You can't prove that we caused any damage." "Actually, we can," I said, pulling out my phone and opening the video file. "Would you like to see the footage? Because I have to warn you, it's pretty graphic." Maren's face went from pale to green. "You recorded us?" "I recorded my company vehicle, which you used without authorization for activities that violated multiple policies and probably several laws." Steinberg held up his hand. "Let's take a step back here. What exactly is Mr. Carter looking for in terms of a settlement?" Linda consulted her notes. Full reimbursement for all misused company resources, including the vehicle repairs. Mrs. Carter's immediate resignation from the company with no severance or benefits. A complete waiver of any claim to business assets in the divorce proceedings, and a signed confession detailing her misconduct, to be held in escrow and released only if she attempts to pursue any legal action against Mr. Carter or the company. That's completely unreasonable, Steinberg protested. What's unreasonable, I said, is screwing my employee in my work van and then trying to claim half my business as compensation. Maren burst into tears. Owen, please, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Can't we work this out? You made a lot of mistakes, Maren. For 8 months. In my van, in his apartment, and probably in half the hotel rooms in the city. The only thing you're sorry about is getting caught. That's not true. Really? Then explain the credit card receipts from the Riverside Motel. Explain the GPS log showing the van parked there for 3 hours on 6 different occasions. Explain the text messages where you and Tyler discussed which room you'd reserved. I pulled out a stack of printed text messages and spread them across the table. Here's my personal favorite. Room 237 again tonight. Bring the strawberry stuff. Very romantic. Steinberg was frantically taking notes, probably trying to figure out how to minimize the damage to his client. Mr. Carter, surely you're not interested in destroying your wife's life over a momentary lapse in judgment. Momentary lapse in judgment? I interrupted. 8 months is not momentary. 47 encounters is not momentary. $12,000 in stolen company resources is not momentary. Owen, Maren pleaded, I'll do anything. I'll pay back the money, I'll resign from the company, I'll sign whatever you want. Just please don't make this public. Why not? You didn't seem concerned about privacy when you were screwing Tyler in the back of my van. Linda leaned forward. Mrs. Carter, I should point out that the offer we've presented is contingent on your immediate acceptance. If we leave this room without a signed agreement, Mr. Carter is prepared to pursue criminal charges and civil remedies to the fullest extent of the law. And, I added, I'll be starting that blog I mentioned, complete with photographs, video clips, and a detailed timeline of your 8-month affair. I'm thinking about calling it How to Destroy Your Marriage in 237 Easy Steps, in honor of your favorite motel room. Maren looked at Steinberg, who was clearly calculating the odds of winning a case with this much evidence stacked against his client. Mr. Steinberg, what should I do? Steinberg sighed. I think you should seriously consider Mr. Carter's offer. It took another hour to hammer out the details, but in the end, Maren signed everything. The resignation letter, the reimbursement agreement, the property settlement, and the confession. She also agreed to a restraining order that prohibited her from coming within 500 feet of Carter Clean's offices or any of our job sites. As we were packing up, Maren made one last attempt at reconciliation. Owen, I know I hurt you, but we had 7 good years together. Doesn't that count for something? I looked at her for a long moment, this woman I'd married and trusted and built a life with. You know what counts, Maren? The fact that you looked me in the eye every morning for 8 months while you were screwing my employee. The fact that you used my business to fund your affair. The fact that when you got caught, your first instinct was to try to take half of everything I'd worked for. I stood up and headed for the door. That's what counts. 2 weeks after the mediation, I was working late in the garage when I heard a car pull into the parking lot. Through the security camera, I watched Tyler Brooks climb out of his Honda and walk toward the front door. He looked like hell, unshaven, wrinkled clothes, and the kind of desperate energy that comes from running out of options. I let him knock for a full minute before opening the door. Tyler, I said pleasantly. This is a surprise. I thought the restraining order was pretty clear about you staying away from my property. I need to talk to you, he said, trying to push past me into the garage. I didn't move. We don't have anything to talk about. Yes, we do. You destroyed my life, Owen. I can't get a job anywhere in this city. Every shop I apply to has heard about what happened. I'm 3 weeks behind on rent, my car's about to be repossessed, and I haven't eaten anything but ramen noodles in a week. That's what happens when you screw your boss's wife, I replied. Actions have consequences. I made a mistake. You made a choice, and now you're living with the results. Tyler's composure cracked. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so much better than me? You ignored Maren for months. You treated her like an employee instead of a wife. What did you expect would happen? I expected my wife to act like an adult and my employee to act professionally. Apparently, that was too much to ask. She was lonely, Owen. She needed someone to pay attention to her, to make her feel wanted. And you were just the guy to help out, right? How noble of you. Tyler stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. You want to know the truth? She came to me. She initiated everything. She was the one who suggested using the van, who booked the motel rooms, who bought the accessories. I was just along for the ride. Congratulations, I said. You've just admitted to being a pathetic loser who let a married woman use him for 8 months of empty attention. I'm sure that'll look great on your resume. Screw you, Owen. I'm not done with this. I'm not done with you. Actually, you are. Because if you don't get off my property in the next 30 seconds, I'm calling the police and having you arrested for violating a restraining order. And since you're already facing criminal charges for theft and fraud, I don't think you want to add trespassing to the list. Tyler stared at me for a long moment, his face cycling through anger, desperation, and finally defeat. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I replied. You just don't know it yet. He walked back to his car, but instead of driving away, he sat there for nearly 10 minutes, probably trying to work up the courage for another confrontation. I watched through the security camera as he made several phone calls, his gestures becoming increasingly agitated with each conversation. Finally, he got out of the car and walked back to the garage, but this time he didn't knock. Instead, he picked up a brick from the landscaping border and hurled it through my front window. The security alarm went off immediately, and I was already on the phone with 911 before the glass finished falling. Tyler stood in the parking lot, breathing hard and looking like he was considering whether to run or throw another brick. Tyler Brooks, I said into the phone. 5'10", brown hair, driving a blue Honda Civic, license plate. I rattled off the number, while Tyler stood there like a deer in headlights. By the time he decided to run, it was too late. The police arrived in less than 5 minutes and found him trying to start his car with hands that were shaking so badly he couldn't get the key in the ignition. I watched from the doorway as they cuffed him and put him in the back of the patrol car. He looked at me through the window, his face a mask of rage and desperation, and mouthed what looked like a threat. I waved. The next morning, Linda Walsh called with an update. Tyler Brooks was charged with criminal mischief, violation of a restraining order, and attempted intimidation. His bail was set at $5,000, which he apparently can't afford. He's looking at 6 months in jail and a permanent criminal record. What about Maren? I asked. Funny you should ask. I got a call from Richard Steinberg this morning. Apparently Mrs. Carter is having second thoughts about the settlement agreement. She's claiming that she signed under duress and wants to renegotiate. I laughed. Really? What did you tell him? I told him that we have a signed confession, recorded admissions of guilt, photographic evidence, and now a criminal case that corroborates everything we've alleged. I also mentioned that if she wants to void the settlement agreement, we'd be happy to pursue criminal charges and civil remedies. How did he respond? He asked if we'd be willing to accept a public apology in addition to the financial restitution. A public apology? Full-page ad in the local business journal acknowledging her misconduct and recommending Carter clean to anyone in need of professional detailing services. I had to admit, the idea had a certain poetic justice to it. Set it up. The ad ran the following week, right next to an article about small business success stories in the region. It was beautifully written, probably by Steinberg himself, and it detailed Maren's serious errors in judgment and violation of the trust placed in her by her husband and business partner. It recommended Carter Clean as a company of integrity and professionalism, and included a formal apology to Owen Carter and the customers who were affected by my misconduct. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone started ringing at 8 in the morning and didn't stop until after 6. By the end of the week, I had 47 new client appointments and 3 requests for interviews from local business publications. The best part was the call I received from Maren's mother, Lorna Voss. She'd been notably absent from the entire proceedings, probably on the advice of her own lawyers, but the public apology had apparently pushed her over the edge. "Owen," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that had made family dinners unbearable for 7 years. "I think you've made your point. Maren has learned her lesson, and Tyler is facing serious consequences for his actions. Isn't it time to show a little mercy?" "Mercy?" I repeated. "Like the mercy your daughter showed when she was stealing from my company to fund her affair? Or the mercy she showed when she tried to claim half my business as compensation for her adultery? She made a mistake. She made dozens of mistakes, Mrs. Voss, for 8 months, and the only reason she's sorry now is because she got caught." "You're destroying her life." "No, I'm not. She destroyed her own life. I'm just making sure she doesn't destroy mine in the process." "This vendetta has gone far enough." "This isn't a vendetta," I interrupted. "This is justice. Your daughter committed multiple crimes, violated numerous contracts, and betrayed every trust I placed in her. The fact that she's facing consequences for those actions isn't vindictive. It's appropriate. I could make things very difficult for you, Owen. I have connections in this city. And I have evidence, Mrs. Voss. 47 photographs, hours of video footage, detailed financial records, and signed confessions. I also have a business that's growing faster than I can handle, and a reputation for integrity that your daughter's public apology has only enhanced." I paused to let that sink in. "So please, by all means, use your connections. Call in your favors. Make things difficult for me, because every time you do, I'll have another reason to make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of family raised a woman who steals from her husband to pay for motel rooms." The line went quiet for a long moment. "You've changed, Owen. You used to be such a nice man." "I'm still a nice man, Mrs. Voss. I'm just not a stupid man anymore." She hung up without another word. 6 months later, Carter Clean had expanded to include 12 full-time employees, 6 company vehicles, and a client list that read like a who's who of the city's business elite. The public apology that was supposed to humiliate me had instead become the best advertising I'd ever received, and my reputation for integrity had made Carter Clean the go-to choice for anyone who valued professionalism and discretion. I was working late on a Friday night, detailing a vintage Corvette for a client who collected classic cars, when I heard a familiar voice outside the garage. "Owen, are you in there?" It was Maren. I looked up from the car's interior to see her standing in the doorway, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. She'd lost weight, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame. Her hair was shorter, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. "Hello, Maren," I said, not stopping my work. "You're violating the restraining order." "I know. I'm sorry, I needed to see you, to talk to you. We don't have anything to talk about." "Please, Owen, just 5 minutes." I set down my cleaning supplies and looked at her properly for the first time. She looked tired, defeated, and genuinely remorseful. It was a far cry from the defiant woman who'd tried to claim half my business 6 months ago. 5 minutes, I said. She stepped into the garage, careful not to come too close. "I wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not the legal kind that my lawyer wrote. I wanted you to know that I understand what I did to you, to us, to everything we built together." "Okay," I said. "Apology noted." "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say, Maren? That I forgive you? That I understand? That we can work things out? I don't know. Something. Anything. I leaned against the workbench and studied her face. You want to know what I think? I think you're sorry you got caught. I think you're sorry you lost your comfortable life and your financial security. I think you're sorry that your actions have consequences, but I don't think you're sorry you did it. That's not true. Really? Because if Tyler walked through that door right now and offered to run away with you, would you go? She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. I thought so, I said. Owen, I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed our marriage and our business partnership. But we had 7 good years together. Doesn't that count for something? It used to, I replied. But you erased those 7 years with 8 months of lies. Every morning you kissed me goodbye while you were planning to meet him. Every night you came home and pretended to be tired from work, while you were actually tired from screwing my employee. Every time you looked me in the eye and told me you loved me while you were stealing from our business to pay for motel rooms. I did love you. No, you didn't. If you'd loved me, you would have talked to me about whatever problems we were having. If you'd loved me, you would have asked for counseling or separation or divorce. If you'd loved me, you wouldn't have stolen from our business and tried to destroy everything I'd worked for. Maren was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, I said. It's broken beyond repair. The only thing you can do now is learn from it and try not to make the same mistakes with the next guy. There is no next guy. Tyler's in jail, and no one else wants anything to do with me after that newspaper ad. That's not my problem. God, you're cold. What happened to the man I married? I thought about that for a moment. He grew up. He learned that being nice doesn't mean being stupid, and that trusting people doesn't mean ignoring evidence. He learned that some mistakes can't be forgiven, and some betrayals can't be forgotten. So that's it? 7 years of marriage, and this is how it ends? This isn't how it ends, Maren. It ended 8 months ago, when you decided to screw Tyler in the back of my work van. Everything since then has just been paperwork. She stood there for another minute, probably hoping I'd say something else, something that would give her hope for reconciliation, or at least absolution. When it became clear that wasn't going to happen, she turned toward the door. For what it's worth, she said, I really am sorry. I know you are, I replied. But sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't give me back the 8 months I spent wondering what was wrong with our marriage while you were planning your next motel visit. Sorry doesn't erase the humiliation of finding out that half the city knew about your affair before I did. Sorry doesn't rebuild the trust you destroyed or restore the respect you threw away. I picked up my cleaning supplies and went back to work on the Corvette. Your 5 minutes are up. She left without another word. I finished the Corvette at 2 a.m, locked up the garage, and drove home to the house I'd bought 6 months ago. A modest place on the other side of town, far enough from our old neighborhood that I didn't have to worry about running into people who wanted to gossip about my failed marriage. The house was quiet and clean and entirely mine. No one else's schedule to consider, no one else's mess to clean up, no one else's lies to pretend to believe. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was honest, and after 8 months of living with deception, honesty felt like a luxury. I poured myself a bourbon and sat on the back porch, looking out at the small yard I'd been slowly landscaping in my spare time. In the morning, I had 3 client appointments, including a new contract with the city's largest law firm, a contract that would probably double my revenue within a year. Carter Clean was thriving. My reputation was solid. My employees were loyal and professional. My bank account was healthy and growing. And my ex-wife was living in a studio apartment across town, working as a receptionist at a medical clinic, and probably wondering how her life had gone so wrong so quickly. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the security camera that had captured everything, the lawyer who had protected my interests, and the insurance company that had denied her claims. Here's to documentation.